You feel the shift the moment your awareness softens, as if an unseen gate opens ahead of schedule, and the current of your path tilts toward a new direction. A familiar presence rises through the quiet, not loud, not dramatic, simply certain. I am a Pleiadian, a messenger aligned with the council that oversees the Seven Sisters, stepping forward to confirm what your body has already begun to sense. The energy beneath Gaia has synchronized with rare precision, and the signal that adjusts your inner coordinates has already brushed through your field. This moment is not rehearsal, not preparation, it is ignition. And as this transmission settles into your system, you will feel how to anchor yourself while new pathways form around you like luminous contours of an unseen map. Pause, beloved one, because what moves now does not press upon you from outside. It rises through you, shaped by the lineage woven into your star-born memory. You didn't encounter this by accident. The ones connected to your origin have been guiding the timing quietly, ensuring this message finds you exactly as the inner veil thins. And as these words drift into your awareness, the resonance of the Seven Sisters stirs long dormant codes, resting in the crystalline chambers of your heart. This is not something you found. It is something that answered you. Many on Earth imagine awakening as gaining something: skills, clarity, superiority, escape. They picture a climb toward a distant height where human concerns dissolve. But for those carrying gentle star lineages, awakening does not come through collecting more. It comes through remembering, through an unveiling, through touching what has always lived beneath the surface of your human story. And when that remembering rises, it is not a thought or a mood. It is a full-body recognition, a cellular knowing that you are, and have always been, a vast, multi-dimensional expression of light, moving through human form. The recognition that rose in the previous moment becomes the doorway into a deeper paradox, because as soon as you feel the truth stirring inside you, an old habit awakens too. The urge to speak, to explain, to justify your knowing to people who were never meant to validate it. You feel that tension like a tremor in your chest. But beneath it, another truth is forming. Your path is shifting from verbal transmission to energetic presence, from shaping words to shaping the field around you. And this is where the source begins whispering a new instruction: soft voice, strong field. Not silence from suppression, but silence from mastery. Not withholding, but refining. Not shrinking, but radiating. Because you've lived lifetimes where your words were used against you. Lifetimes where your clarity threatened the structures around you, where your tenderness was interpreted as weakness, where your brilliance was twisted into danger. Those memories echo subtly through your throat, creating a reflex: speak quickly, explain yourself, over-clarify, justify, prove your purity, defend your intention. Every time you feel misunderstood, this reflex tightens. Every time someone challenges you, it flares. Every time you feel alone in your knowing, it rises like a plea. But that reflex doesn't belong to this incarnation. It's residue: old vows, old wounds, old patterns of protection. You carry the imprint of being silenced and the imprint of being punished for speaking. And ironically, these opposite traumas merge into the same impulse: talk more, talk faster, talk louder, hoping someone will finally understand. Yet your mission now moves in the opposite direction. Your energy speaks more honestly than your mouth ever could. Your field carries more truth than 1,000 explanations. Your coherence persuades without persuasion. The source doesn't ask you to stop speaking because your voice is unworthy. The source asks you to let your voice soften because your field has become strong enough to carry what your words can no longer hold. When you walk into a room with a regulated nervous system, a steady heart, and a grounded light, the environment shifts. Conversations slow, tension dissolves, people breathe deeper without knowing why. Even your silence emits reassurance. This is not metaphor, this is resonance. This is coherence. This is the true language of your lineage. And yet, the human part of you still tries to translate that light into sentences, thinking the message is incomplete without verbal confirmation. But every time you over-explain, every time you reach outward for understanding, you weaken the signal you're meant to broadcast. not because words are wrong, but because they scatter what your energy is trying to hold steady. There will always be those who cannot hear you through language, but can feel you through presence. There will always be those who dismiss your sentences, but soften in your atmosphere. There will always be those who resist your truths, but yield to your coherence. This is how the new directive unfolds, not through louder proclamations, not through spiritual debates, not through trying to prove your multidimensional nature, but through refinement of field, through stillness inside your chest, through a softening of your throat so your heart can broadcast without interference. Your presence becomes the message. Your steadiness becomes the teaching. Your radiance becomes the transmission. And slowly, you begin to realize that the people who are meant to understand you will not arrive because of your explanations. They will arrive because of the way their own energy reorganizes when they stand near yours. Quiet voice, powerful field. This is the new instruction carved into your path. The realization settles slowly that those who are meant to find resonance with you are guided not by your explanations, but by the quiet gravity of your field. And as that awareness takes root, you begin noticing something else. The noise around you feels louder than ever, not because it has increased, but because your sensitivity has sharpened. The contrast grows clearer. The subtle interference that once blended into the background now stands out like static. This is where your journey brushes against the corridor of forgetting, the place every starseed passed through when descending into human form. You walk through a narrowing of perception, a dimming of memory, a soft filter that helped you adapt to density. But once inside the human world, something unexpected happened. You were met with layers and layers of noise, opinions, fear, narratives, expectations, collective anxiety, cultural conditioning, familial patterns, internalized urgency, endless distractions. Human noise. This noise is not evil. It is simply the atmosphere of a species still learning to hear itself. But when you entered it, your own clarity became muffled, and your throat, your communicator center, became the battleground between your soul's knowing and the world's demands. You felt compelled to speak louder just to be heard over the static. You tried to explain truths the noise was not designed to understand. You forced illumination into places still choosing shadow. You stretched your voice until it frayed. All the while, the original wound beneath the wound forgetting kept whispering. Maybe if you speak clearly enough, the world will remember you, but the world cannot remember you until you remember yourself through the noise. This is where many starseeds accidentally amplify the very fog they're trying to escape. When you try to fit into the human matrix by mimicking its pace, matching its urgency, or adopting its fears, your field destabilizes. Your light bends inward, your clarity fragments. You begin to feel disconnected from your own source, even though the connection was never broken. The noise of Earth pushes you toward two extremes, either shouting your truth in desperation or collapsing into silence from exhaustion. Neither of these is alignment. Neither reflects who you are. Neither reveals your true presence. The corridor of forgetting was never the problem. It was part of the design. The challenge arises only when you mistake the noise for the truth. As your remembrance stirs, you start to feel the difference between internal quiet and external silence. Internal quiet is grounding. External silence can be avoidance. The directive you are receiving now asks for neither avoidance nor self-defense. It asks for calibrated presence, where your inner quiet becomes so steady that the noise no longer infiltrates your field. This is how the veil thins, not by battling the noise, but by rising above its frequency. When the human world becomes loud, you slow your breath. When the collective field becomes chaotic, your heart expands. When the old patterns call for explanation, your presence answers instead. When you feel the pull to justify yourself, you choose coherence. The more you return to yourself, the clearer the world becomes. The more you regulate your field, the softer the noise feels. The more you root into your quiet, the more you remember the path out of forgetting. And in that remembrance, something profound begins to happen. The noise stops feeling like an enemy and becomes a contrast, a backdrop against which your light becomes impossible to miss. You do not escape the corridor. You illuminate it, and others, Sensing the glow? Begin to remember their own way through. This is where your path turns next. As the glow of your remembering begins to light the corridor behind you, another tension rises, subtle but unmistakable. It's the ache that's lived in your chest for years, maybe lifetimes. The part of you that wonders why you feel different even in a crowded room, why your longing feels older than your name, why you sense a home you cannot point to on any earthly map. This ache is real, beloved one, and it often disguises itself as a desire to speak your truth at full volume, to announce your cosmic identity so someone, somewhere, might say, "I see you." But beneath that longing sits an even deeper truth. Your homesickness doesn't come from being unseen by humans. It comes from remembering the frequency of where you came from. And that remembrance is so tender, so ancient, that your human self tries to compensate in the only way it knows how, by speaking more. You begin telling your story to people who cannot meet you. You share visions with those who hear only metaphor. You reveal your inner world to ears still attuned to survival noise. You reach outward, hoping the ache will subside. And when misunderstanding meets you, as it often does, you feel a jolt of loneliness. The urge to speak grows stronger, as though more words could bridge the gap. But here is the quiet paradox: loud truth-telling rarely heals the ache. Instead, it amplifies the wound. Because the wound was never caused by a lack of speaking, it was caused by a distance from your own field. The sorrow you carry for your star family is sacred, but when filtered through unhealed longing, it can push you into over-disclosure, oversharing, and over-explaining. You may find yourself pouring cosmic truths into conversations that were never meant to hold them, hoping to feel less alone, less strange, less separate. Yet the moment you try to force the world to understand your multidimensional nature, your field contracts, your heart tightens, and your throat grows weary. This is why the Source asks for softness, not silence, gentle voice, powerful presence. Because the homesickness you feel is not a punishment, it is a compass. Because the loneliness you feel is not proof of disconnection, it is preparation. Because the ache you feel is not a flaw, it is a signal. The more you try to explain the ache, the stronger it becomes. The more you try to justify your truth, the further you drift from it. The more you try to shout your belonging, the less you feel it. But the moment you turn inward, truly inward, the ache begins to change shape. It becomes warmth, it becomes clarity, it becomes the first soft notes of your original frequency returning to your awareness. Your star family has never needed your words to hear you. They listen to resonance, not vocabulary. They feel coherence, not rhetoric. They respond to your field, not your explanations. And when you shift from verbalizing your truth to embodying it, the homesickness doesn't vanish, something far more beautiful happens. It transforms into connection. You start noticing signs not because you searched for them, but because your field softened enough to receive them. You feel companionship in your dreams, not because you begged for it, but because your heart became still enough to recognize it. You walk through your day with the subtle sense that you are accompanied not metaphorically, but energetically. This is the paradox that liberates you. The less you force your truth outward, the more your truth guides you inward. And as you settle into that inner resonance, loneliness begins to dissolve. Your ache was never asking for louder words. It was asking for deeper presence. As your ache shifts from emptiness into presence, a new clarity begins to rise in the space that opens. It's subtle at first, like a soft vibration beneath your ribs, yet it grows each time you breathe with intention. You begin sensing that your heart is not simply an emotional organ, not merely a center of feeling, but the very transmitter through which your entire lineage speaks. And this realization ushers you into the next threshold, the crystalline heart becoming your primary language. When you stop forcing your truth outward, something remarkable happens. Your chest becomes still, your field becomes coherent, your energy becomes audible in ways words could never emulate. The Pleiadian current does not move through spoken sentences, it moves through resonance. It travels as feeling, as warmth, as quiet luminosity. Your heart functions not as a metaphorical portal, but as a literal interface between dimensions where memory, intuition, and cosmic intelligence braid together and radiate into the world around you. In earlier lifetimes, you may have relied heavily on your voice teaching through speech, guiding through explanation, protecting others with knowledge. But in this incarnation, the directive is different. Your presence holds more influence than your language. Your coherence teaches more clearly than your vocabulary. Your regulated heart field transmits more effectively than any message shaped by the mind. This is why the Source asked for your voice to soften, not to silence you, but to unbind the power that lives beneath your ribs. Your heart, when steady, becomes a beacon. When softened, a sanctuary. When open, a transmitter. Through this transmitter, you speak without speaking. You speak through the way you breathe when tension enters a room. You speak through the warmth behind your eyes when someone feels unseen. You speak through the gentleness of your presence when others are overwhelmed. You speak through the internal stillness that anchors chaotic spaces. And when you live from this place, your entire field reorganizes. You begin holding emotion differently, holding memory differently, holding yourself differently. The world senses the shift even if no one can explain it. People relax in your presence. Animals approach you without hesitation. Children stare at you with curiosity. Strangers disclose their pain without knowing why. None of this happens because of your words, it happens because of your coherence. Your crystalline heart communicates in ways the human mind doesn't fully understand. It broadcasts clarity even when you say nothing. It sends reassurance even when you remain silent. It invites harmony simply by being regulated. This is the language of your lineage feeling, not phrasing, radiance, not rhetoric. And yet, this doesn't mean you avoid speaking entirely. It means you speak from alignment rather than urgency. When words arise from your heart instead of your fear, they feel different. They are fewer in number, but greater in impact. They land softly. They settle deeply. They hold truth without force. This is how the crystalline heart teaches, not through argument, but through emanation, not through persuasion, but through coherence, not through performance, but through presence. Your field becomes the message. Your breath becomes the delivery. Your compassion becomes the translation. As you walk through your human life with this awareness, you stop trying to push your light outward. Instead, your light flows effortlessly from the well within you. And as it flows, you begin to recognize a quiet truth that has always lived in your chest. Your heart has been speaking for you far longer than your voice ever has. When you finally accept that your heart has been transmitting long before your voice ever formed a sentence, your awareness begins to drift downward into your feet, your legs, your connection with the living world beneath you. Something clicks into place. You realize that your field is not only shaped by your inner coherence, but also by where you stand, how you move, and how you inhabit the earth itself. The grid beneath your feet, Gaia's crystalline lattice, has been waiting for you to feel it, to partner with it, to walk as a conscious participant rather than a passive visitor. For so long, you've associated your mission with the stars, with memory, with light shaped in distant realms. But as your heart stabilizes, a new truth whispers through your body. Your mission is not above you. It is beneath you. The ground becomes a teacher. The soil becomes a transmitter. The earth becomes a collaborator. You discover that your presence, not your proclamations, is the way your lineage merges with Gaia's grid. Every step you take with awareness sends a signal. Every breath you anchor in your belly strengthens a conduit. Every moment of quiet observation plants coherence into the environment around you. This is why your voice no longer needs to carry the weight it once did. The grid listens. The land listens. The subtle realms listen. And they respond not to words, but to resonance. You begin to sense that the simplest acts of your day are not simple at all. Standing in line becomes a ceremony of grounding. Washing your hands or preparing a meal becomes an offering of steadiness. Walking across a room becomes a form of grid keeping. Sitting in silence becomes a moment of planetary harmonization. This is the essence of embodied mission, small acts performed with great coherence. Many starseeds imagine their purpose must be dramatic visions, revelations, grand transformations. But your lineage carries a quieter instruction. You anchor light not through spectacle, but through consistency, not through metaphysical display, but through attunement, not through leaving Earth, but through bonding with her. Gaia does not need you to transcend her. She needs you to touch her, to feel the pulse beneath her crust, to root your star-born frequency into her shifting grid. When you make contact with the Earth barefoot on soil, palms on stone, breath in open air, you feel a soft alignment occur. Anxiety dissolves. Mental noise quiets. Your field reorders itself without effort. The crystalline network beneath you responds like a living organism. It recognizes you. It remembers you. It adjusts to accommodate your signature the way water accepts the shape of a vessel. This is why grounding practices matter not as a spiritual trend, but as energetic integration. Your body becomes the bridge. Your heart becomes the transmitter. Your quiet becomes the stabilizer. Humans around you may never know what you're doing. They may never recognize the way your stillness affects a room, or the way your grounded presence shifts the emotional tone of a conversation, or the way your regulated field dissolves tension in family systems. But Gaia knows. The grid knows. Your star family knows. You walk your mission one breath at a time, one step at a time, one moment of coherence at a time, and slowly, without fanfare, you become a stabilizing point in the human collective, a subtle anchor of clarity in a world often overwhelmed by its own noise. This is the power of embodied presence. This is the service your lineage prepared you for. And this is only the beginning of what your quiet field can do. As you walk the world as a quiet anchor, one breath, one step, one thread of coherence at a time, something else begins to shift. Not outwardly at first, but internally, in the quiet places between your thoughts. You start noticing sensations that feel like soft brushes of familiarity. A warmth behind the sternum, a subtle tingling across the shoulders, a sudden stillness that doesn't feel like emptiness, but like presence. And gradually, you realize you're not walking alone, for your star family does not meet you in noise. They meet you in the spaces where noise dissolves, when your field steadies, the veil thins, when your breath deepens, the channel clears, when your mind softens, the signal strengthens. This is why the journey has led you through silence, grounding, coherence. These states are not spiritual aesthetics. They are the exact conditions through which the Pleiadian frequency becomes perceivable again. Your lineage has always communicated through subtlety, through impression rather than dialogue, through resonance rather than instruction. And when you begin living with internal quiet, the conversation resumes. At first, the signs are delicate, a repeated number sequence appearing at uncanny times, a tingling at the back of your neck without physical cause, a dream that feels more like a visit than a story, a feather placed precisely in your path, a fragment of memory rising in meditation, not as imagination but as recognition. Each sign is a knock on a door you've carried since birth. Each sensation is a reminder that the thread was never severed. Each moment of clarity is an echo of a connection older than Earth itself. Your star family speaks in ways that bypass the analytical mind. Through the body, through intuition, through the field, they do not need your vocabulary, they need your openness. They do not require your belief. They respond to your resonance. And the more your life becomes organized around coherence, the clearer their presence becomes. What once felt like coincidence becomes communication. What once felt like imagination becomes memory. What once felt like silence becomes dialogue. But this dialogue unfolds not in words, but in knowing. You may sit in meditation and feel a pressure against your upper back, as if someone stands behind you with gentle reassurance. You may wake from sleep with insights fully formed, arriving without effort. You may sense a warmth in the room, a shift in density, a companion presence brushing the edge of your awareness. You may feel guided toward choices without logical explanation, yet the outcome aligns perfectly. This is how star family contact feels subtle, immersive, unmistakable. And as the connection strengthens, something else awakens trust. Not naive trust, not blind trust, but the deep trust that comes from felt companionship an inner certainty that you're supported by intelligences who understand your path far more clearly than the human world ever could. Yet this trust is not about dependence. It is about resonance. When your field rises into alignment, you join a conversation that never stopped. You tune into a station that has always been broadcasting. You match the frequency of the ones who accompanied you through lifetimes, who watched your incarnation, who walk beside you even when you forget. Their presence does not remove your challenges, it supports you through them. Their guidance does not override your will, it amplifies your clarity. Their love does not rescue you, it reminds you who you are. The more you soften, the stronger the contact becomes. The quieter you become, the louder they feel. The steadier you become, the clearer their signal. You are not reconnecting. You are remembering a connection that never faded. When you accept that the connection never faded, that you were held even in the moments you felt most alone, your attention shifts again, this time toward the people in your life. Family, friends, co-workers, strangers in passing. You begin to sense how their energy moves, how their nervous systems respond, how their patterns flare or soften. And with this sensitivity comes a new challenge: how to stay open without slipping into the old reflex of preaching, proving, or persuading. For the more you feel your star family, the more you long to share that frequency with others. But here is the truth whispered gently from the higher currents. Humans awaken through resonance, not rhetoric. Through safety, not pressure. Through presence, not performance. Your task is not to convert anyone. Your task is to embody coherence. And this is where your relationships become living portals, not places where you must speak your cosmic identity, but places where you practice the subtle art of being. You begin noticing moments when the urge to explain rises in your throat, moments when someone's skepticism triggers the residue of old wounds, moments when you feel that familiar pull to defend your experiences or to reveal more than the moment can hold. These moments are invitations, not to collapse, not to lecture, but to regulate. When you soften your chest, the dynamic changes. When you slow your breath, the atmosphere shifts. When you stay grounded instead of reactive, coherence enters the conversation. People feel it instantly, even if they do not understand it. Their shoulders drop, their tone softens, their guard lowers. They begin speaking from a deeper place without realizing why. They mirror your field because your field gives them permission to descend into their own. This is how awakening works from the inside out, not through teaching, through safety, through presence, through resonance. When you relate from coherence, your interactions stop being exchanges of personality and become exchanges of frequency. A simple conversation becomes a field of attunement. A shared silence becomes a moment of healing. Even disagreement becomes gentle rather than charged. Your role is not to correct others. Your role is not to diagnose their patterns. Your role is not to elevate yourself above them. Your role is to create a pocket of harmony where their own wisdom can rise. And something else occurs when you approach relationships in this way. You stop leaking energy. You stop chasing validation. You stop abandoning your own field to meet others in their turbulence. Instead, you hold steady and let them rise to meet you if they choose to. Some will, some won't. That is not your burden. You are not here to drag others into awakening. You are here to remind them wordlessly what alignment feels like. A calm presence disrupts cycles of fear. A regulated nervous system interrupts generational patterns. A grounded heart dissolves the subtle aggression of the collective field. And yet, you do all of this without saying much at all. This is why your voice is soft, but your field is loud. This is why your words are gentle, but your presence is undeniable. This is why your human connections feel different now. You carry a quiet frequency that rearranges the energy of a space before you even speak. You become, through practice and embodiment, a living doorway, a threshold through which others can feel their own truth more clearly. This is the beginning of relational mastery, not through control, but through coherence. And as this mastery deepens, your path expands once more, as your relationships shift into fields of resonance rather than arenas of explanation. Something deeper begins to awaken inside you, You start noticing how your presence itself moves through the world, how the way you stand, breathe, walk, listen, or pause creates ripples far beyond your intention. There is a quiet authority forming in you, not born from status or effort, but from coherence. And with this awareness comes the next transformation, living as a walking transmission. Not transmitting ideas and transmitting frequency. When your inner state stabilizes, the boundary between spiritual practice and daily life dissolves. The extraordinary becomes woven into the ordinary. Your path stops being separate from your chores, your relationships, your errands, your pauses in the grocery line. Everything becomes a place for your light to move. You begin to feel it in the simplest motions. The way your hand touches a doorknob. The way your steps land on the ground. The way your breath leaves your body when you exhale. The way your awareness lingers on a tree, a cloud, a stranger's weary eyes. Each gesture becomes a subtle offering. Each moment becomes a wordless prayer. Each breath becomes a message encoded in presence. This is what your lineage always intended, not dramatic displays of spiritual power, but quiet frequency work hidden in plain sight. You blend with the human world while simultaneously adjusting its field. You walk as an invisible lighthouse, not calling attention to yourself, yet illuminating the energetic landscape wherever you go. There is no performance here, no stage, no audience, no applause. The influence you carry is quiet, subsensory, felt rather than noticed. When you enter a room, the atmosphere shifts a fraction. When you sit down, the tone of the space recalibrates. When you look at someone with unguarded compassion, they feel safer without understanding why. This is the potency of embodied coherence. You have become the message, not the one who speaks it, but the one who is it. And ironically, this makes you far more impactful than words ever could. People sense an alignment in you that they crave but can't articulate. They are drawn to the ease in your presence because it reflects a possibility within themselves. You become a mirror shining softly on their hidden wholeness. But with this expanded influence comes a deeper responsibility, one not rooted in pressure, but in awareness. Every time you allow fear to take the wheel, your field tightens, and the space around you echoes that tension. Every time you choose coherence instead of reactivity, the space around you echoes that too. You become a tuning fork, shaping the emotional frequency of the environments you inhabit. This is the essence of subtle service, unseen, unclaimed, but deeply felt. Your mission is not to convince people of anything. Your mission is to create spaces where their deeper truth can breathe. This is why your life feels like prayer now, not the ritualized kind, but the lived kind. A continuous offering, a steady frequency, a gentle reminder to the collective that there is another way to exist. And as you embrace this role, a realization dawns: you've stopped trying to escape the human world, and instead have begun inhabiting it with purpose. You're no longer looking for a place to belong. You're becoming the place where others momentarily remember themselves. This is transmission. This is embodiment. This is the quiet radiance your lineage trained you for. And with this step, your journey enters its final arc. As you recognize that you've become a place of remembrance for others, a living point of calm in a world saturated with noise, another layer of clarity begins to take shape. It rises slowly, like dawn lifting its first light over a quiet horizon. You realize that all along, beneath every ache, every awakening, every moment of silence, there has been a deeper lesson unfolding: trust. Not the fragile trust that depends on outcomes, but the cosmic kind, the trust that lives beyond explanation. Because now you see it. Every bend in your path, every delay you couldn't understand, every longing that felt unanswered, every moment when the grid pulled you inward instead of outward, all of it was part of a sequence so precise, so intricately woven, that your human mind could never have held it. You were never late. You were never behind. You were never abandoned. You were being aligned. And this is where the Source invites you to release the last old impulse that lingers beneath your awakening. The urge to explain yourself. The quiet pressure to justify who you are, why you feel what you feel, why your frequency is different, why your path doesn't resemble anyone else's. Explanation was a survival strategy. Justification was a shield. Speaking too loudly was a call for safety. But now you stand in a different field. Your coherence is stronger than your doubt. Your presence is more stable than your fear. Your heart speaks more clearly than your words ever could. And because of that, the need to be understood softens into something gentler, something like acceptance. You begin to see that life unfolds in spirals, not lines, that the timing you once questioned was actually a form of protection, that your detours were recalibrations, that your solitude was initiation, that your silence was preparation for a deeper kind of voice, the kind that speaks without sound. The cosmic sequence is not random. It is responsive. It is intelligent. It is loving. And as you surrender into it, something profound happens. The world stops feeling like a place you must survive and becomes a place you are meant to inhabit. You no longer try to outrun the present moment. You enter it. You no longer look for the next sign. You become steady enough to notice the signs already around you. You no longer question whether you're on the right path. You feel the path beneath your feet and it feels like home. This trust doesn't make your life effortless, but it makes it anchored. You stop forcing outcomes and start participating in them. You stop rushing the journey and start receiving it. You stop worrying about whether people understand you and start focusing on whether you understand yourself. And as your trust deepens, your connection to your star family shifts again. Their presence becomes less like occasional visitations and more like a steady hum, a constant companion woven through your awareness. You feel them not as others, but as extensions of the same intelligence that breathe through your own heart. They do not lead you, they walk with you. This is the culmination of your awakening, not escape, but embodiment, not transcendence, but participation, not separation, but union. You are no longer two selves, human and star. You are one coherent being, one integrated presence, one quiet field that speaks louder than words ever could. And as you stand in this integrated wholeness, the final truth becomes impossibly clear. You were never meant to convince anyone of your light. You were meant to become it. As the final truth settles into your body, that you were never meant to convince anyone of your light, only to be it, a quiet hush moves through your field, not an ending, but a soft folding in, the way dusk wraps a landscape in gentle shadow before the stars reveal themselves. You feel a loosening in your chest, a tender release, as though every step of your journey has been leading you toward this single, spacious breath. You're standing in yourself now fully, calmly, without resistance. The urgency that once lived behind your ribs has softened into something steady, something warm. You no longer reach outward for confirmation. You no longer strain to be heard. Instead, your light moves without effort, flowing from the deep well of coherence you've cultivated throughout this path. And in this quiet, something subtle awakens, a sense of companionship, a soft awareness of presence, a feeling of being held from within and beyond. It's your star family, yes, but it is also your own higher self, the part of you that never stepped into forgetting, the part that has been guiding you gently through every threshold. Their love is not dramatic. It arrives like warmth, like clarity, like a soft pulse of belonging moving all the way through your spine. You breathe, and the earth responds. You soften, and the field brightens. You rest, and the entire grid exhales with you. This is the quiet power you carry, the ability to shape your environment through steadiness rather than effort, through resonance rather than force. You've learned to listen beneath the noise, to speak through your presence, to anchor light not with proclamation but with coherence. And now, as the night settles or the day unfolds, you step into the simplest and most sacred truth. You are enough as you are. You are guided as you walk. You are connected as you breathe. You are home even here. Let this awareness hold you as you move through the hours ahead. Let it wrap around your heart like a soft mantle. And as you rest or rise, remember this: your silence radiates. Your presence heals. Your light continues.